I slammed my laptop shut, fury bubbling. Unprofessional? HR had actually said that. My hair. Me. In 2025. I refused to let ignorance define my worth. I needed a plan, not a meltdown. I paced my apartment, counting the ways they had judged me incorrectly. Each thought sharpened my resolve. My hair was a distraction. It was part of me, part of my culture, part of my identity. Yet here I was, being told that who I naturally was could somehow undermine my work. I felt a mix of disbelief and determination surge through me. If I let this slide, it would set a precedent I couldn't stand for. I sat back down, fingers flying across the keyboard. I drafted a concise, professional email requesting a private meeting. I attached evidence, client emails praising my leadership, project reports showing measurable results, peer commendations. Every line reinforced one point. My competence could not be questioned because of appearance. I reread the company's inclusivity policies, underlining the language that supported my case. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was asserting the principle that professionalism is about skill and results, not hair texture or style. The day of the meeting arrived. I walked into the HR office with my shoulders back, my head high, my natural curls framing my face with pride. They greeted me with a polite, slightly condescending smile, expecting me to shrink. I didn't. I calmly laid out my case. I referenced policy, presented documentation, and highlighted examples of employees who thrived while expressing themselves authentically. I watched the shift in their posture as my logic landed, undeniable and precise. Questions came, some defensive, some probing, but I answered each with clarity. I didn't argue, I clarified. I didn't raise my voice, I presented facts. I could see them adjusting, recalibrating their assumptions, realizing that their perception had been flawed. I concluded by asserting, firmly but professionally, that my appearance was a personal expression that had never interfered with my performance. 2 hours later, I received the call I'd been waiting for. HR apologized, acknowledging their misstep. They promised a policy review to prevent future bias. I walked out with my head high, curls bouncing freely, a quiet victory resonating in every step. I hadn't just offended my hair. I had reinforced my dignity, my right to exist authentically in a professional space, and my ability to confront prejudice with strategy rather than emotion. I returned to my desk, expecting relief, but the office buzz felt different. Whispers followed me, subtle glances darting my way. Some were curious, some judgmental, and some cautious, as if they were testing how I would react next. I straightened in my chair, letting the murmurs roll off. I wasn't here to please anyone. I was here to work, unapologetically. By mid-morning, an email appeared in my inbox, an invitation to speak at a company-wide workshop on inclusivity. HR had initiated it. I paused, reading the lines over and over. Opportunity or trap, I chose to see it as the former. This was my chance to shift perceptions, to teach, to assert that professionalism is not dictated by hair, skin, or style, but by results, leadership, and integrity. I spent hours preparing. I didn't just want to share my story. I wanted to make it resonate. I gathered case studies of successful workplaces embracing diversity, statistics on bias and productivity, and anecdotes that illustrated how authentic self-expression strengthens teams. I rehearsed until every word felt precise, every tone deliberate. Humor, gravity, facts, each element carefully balanced to leave no room for dismissal. The day of the workshop, I walked into the auditorium with measured confidence. Eyes followed me, some skeptical, some intrigued. I opened with my story, not as complaint, but as a testament to resilience and professionalism. I laid out the facts, my achievements, my contributions, the policies that supported me. I spoke about unconscious bias, about how narrow perceptions can undermine talent, and about why inclusion matters for every team member. Questions came fast, some sharp, some hesitant. One manager challenged me, suggesting that appearance does reflect professionalism. I responded calmly, citing examples of high-performing employees whose personal style had never affected results. I shared research and real-world examples where embracing individuality had increased creativity, retention, and morale. The room shifted. Skepticism softened. Curiosity replaced doubt, and I could feel the narrative bending in my favor. Afterward, colleagues approached quietly, some apologetic, some impressed, some seeking guidance. It hit me then. My battle had become more than mine alone. By standing firm, I had created space for others to exist authentically without fear. My hair, once a point of contention, had become a symbol of strength, strategy, and authenticity. That evening, I returned to my office, the hum of fluorescent lights blending with the quiet pride in my chest. Emails from new projects, requests for collaboration, and even a congratulatory note from an executive filled my inbox. Recognition had arrived not from anger, but from persistence, preparation, and unwavering self-respect. I realized something profound. Professionalism is defined by competence, courage, and authenticity, and those qualities I possess in abundance. The days after the workshop were different. There was a subtle shift in energy, more respect in the hallway nods, fewer whispered comments. Yet, I sensed that the real test hadn't ended. If anything, the higher stakes were just beginning. I had won acknowledgement from HR and peers, but influence, real influence, demanded more than a single victory. A week later, an unexpected email arrived from a senior executive. The subject line was neutral, but my gut told me this was significant. Discussion, leadership, and professional standards. I opened it cautiously, heart pounding. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning, in the top-floor conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The thought of facing executives filled me with both anticipation and nerves. This was my moment to turn personal victory into systemic change. I spent the night preparing with surgical precision. I updated my documentation, including new client successes, performance metrics, and recent peer acknowledgments. I researched corporate governance, industry standards, and examples of companies that had embraced authentic self-expression without compromising results. I anticipated objections, rehearsed answers, and visualized the room, the questions, the possible skepticism. By the time I went to sleep, my mind was a map of strategy and evidence, ready for deployment. Morning arrived, and I walked into the conference room with quiet confidence. The executives were already seated, their expressions polite but curious. I began by sharing my story succinctly, highlighting my accomplishments, the HR incident in the workshop. I emphasized results, metrics, and measurable impact rather than emotion. Then, I pivoted, showing how appearance-based judgments could unintentionally exclude talent, diminish morale, and risk legal liability. I spoke clearly, deliberately, allowing facts and logic to dominate the conversation. Questions came fast. One executive raised concerns about company image, suggesting that traditional standards of appearance maintain professionalism. I countered carefully, citing industry examples where innovation and inclusion had strengthened brand perception, retention, and revenue. Another questioned whether this was an isolated issue. I responded with data from studies on unconscious bias and employee engagement, making it impossible to frame my experience as anecdotal or irrelevant. By the end of the session, the atmosphere had shifted. The executives leaned forward, nodding, some visibly taking notes. They asked how policy could be updated, how training could address bias, and how leadership could model inclusivity. I outlined a plan, concise but actionable, bridging authenticity with company objectives. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then the CEO spoke, a measured acknowledgement that our company could lead by example, fostering an environment where professionalism was defined by contribution, not conformity. I left the meeting with a mix of relief and exhilaration. I had not just defended myself. I had influenced change at the highest level. The experience left me buzzing with energy and a renewed sense of purpose. I realized that true professionalism wasn't just about navigating office politics. It was about shaping the culture, showing courage, and turning moments of bias into opportunity for growth, for myself and for others. The weeks that followed felt like walking on a tightrope. The office had shifted. Respectful glances replaced whispers, but subtle skepticism lingered in corners. I knew that lasting change required persistence, not a single conversation. I couldn't just win a meeting. I had to reinforce the narrative that professionalism and self-expression could coexist. An opportunity arrived in the form of a high-profile client pitch. I was slated to lead it, presenting to executives from a multinational corporation known for rigid traditional standards. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the perfect test. Could I demonstrate that my credibility and competence were absolute, regardless of appearance? I spent nights refining the presentation, scripting each transition, anticipating questions, and ensuring every visual reinforced clarity and confidence. The day of the pitch, I walked into the boardroom with my hair naturally styled, perfectly aligned with my authentic self. The room was formal, tension palpable. I began speaking, voice steady, projecting authority without aggression. I outlined solutions, presented data, and showcased innovative strategies, weaving stories of previous successes seamlessly into my points. Every slide, every example, every gesture was deliberate, reinforcing expertise over aesthetics. Halfway through, a senior client raised a subtle objection, questioning whether our team could deliver on the ambitious promises. I paused, looked him in the eye, and calmly outlined our metrics, the team's experience, and our track record. I connected each point to tangible outcomes, leaving no space for doubt. By the end of the presentation, the atmosphere had transformed. Skepticism gave way to engagement, admiration, and ultimately agreement. The client shook my hand firmly, complimenting not just the strategy, but my leadership. Later that afternoon, HR and several executives gathered in my office. They were candid, reflective, and even a little awed. The workshop, the policy updates, and now the client's success had crystallized a lesson. Professionalism isn't about fitting a mold. It's about impact, integrity, and authenticity. They discussed implementing broader inclusivity initiatives, acknowledging that my stand had created tangible positive change for the company culture. I leaned back in my chair, allowing a rare moment of satisfaction to wash over me. I had started this journey defending my hair, my identity, and my dignity. Along the way, I had proven that authenticity and excellence are inseparable. The whispers had faded, replaced by recognition and respect. My hair, my presence, my professionalism, they were no longer in conflict. They were aligned, undeniable, and unstoppable. Walking out of the office that evening, the sun casting golden light across the city skyline, I felt an immense sense of triumph. Not just personal victory, but the knowledge that I had shifted a culture, inspired colleagues, and created a precedent for those who would follow. I hadn't just defended my hair. I had demonstrated that true professionalism comes from confidence, competence, and courage, qualities no one can ever judge or take away. The success of the client pitch reverberated through the office in unexpected ways. Emails of appreciation trickled in from colleagues I barely knew. Invitations to lead initiatives arrived, each carrying a silent acknowledgement. I had proven myself. Yet, even with recognition, a part of me remained vigilant. Change, I knew, was fragile. Bias doesn't vanish overnight. It lingers in assumptions, in subtle glances, in unspoken expectations. One afternoon, I received a message from a junior team member, hesitant but earnest. "I'm nervous about expressing myself at work. I don't want to face what you face." My chest tightened. Their fear reminded me that this journey wasn't just mine. It was about paving a path for others, making authenticity safe and respected. I replied with encouragement, sharing strategies I had used, emphasizing preparation, clarity, and the courage to stand firm without aggression. I realized that influence wasn't just about boardrooms and executives. It was also about mentoring, guiding, and creating confidence in others. Soon, HR requested another meeting. This time, the tone was collaborative, almost consultative. They wanted my input on revising appearance policies, on creating trainings to prevent bias, and on ways to empower employees to express themselves professionally without fear. I walked into the room prepared, armed not just with evidence, but with a vision. I shared examples from industry leaders, drafted clear frameworks, and outlined practical solutions that balanced individuality with workplace cohesion. The room shifted as I spoke. What had started as a personal battle had grown into an opportunity to shape company culture. I saw nods of agreement, the kind that signaled true understanding, not just politeness. By the end, the HR team committed to implementing the changes, acknowledging that my experience had highlighted gaps they hadn't previously recognized. It was validation, yes, but also responsibility. The fight wasn't just about me anymore. It was about creating a sustainable culture of respect and inclusivity. That evening, I returned to my desk, exhausted but exhilarated. I scrolled to my calendar, realizing how far I'd come, from a single comment about my hair to influencing policies, mentoring colleagues, and earning the respect of top executives. I allowed myself a quiet moment of pride. I had faced bias head-on, armed with preparation, logic, and self-respect. I had turned a moment of potential humiliation into a ripple of change that could touch countless others. And yet, I knew the journey wasn't over. Professionalism and authenticity would continue to collide for many, but now, I had proven the formula. Clarity, evidence, courage, and calm resolve. With those tools, no comment, no assumption, no narrow-minded standard could diminish me, or anyone willing to stand firm. My hair, my identity, my professionalism, they were inseparable, and they were stronger than ever. Months passed, and the change I had fought for began to ripple throughout the company. Policies were updated, trainings introduced, and conversations about inclusivity became routine rather than exceptional. I walked the halls and noticed subtle differences. Colleagues who once hesitated now wore their identities proudly, expressing themselves without fear. The whispers had disappeared, replaced by respect, collaboration, and quiet admiration. One morning, I received an invitation I hadn't expected, a panel at a national industry conference titled Redefining Professionalism in Modern Workplaces. They wanted me to speak not just about accomplishments, but about resilience, strategy, and authenticity. I felt a surge of pride and responsibility. This was no longer a personal story. It was a movement, an example for others navigating similar challenges. I prepared meticulously, curating stories that highlighted courage, preparation, and persistence over anger or defiance. I emphasized that professionalism isn't conformity. It's contribution, impact, and integrity. I shared concrete examples of how bias could be confronted with evidence, calm reasoning, and strategic action. When I stepped onto that stage, hair natural and unapologetic, the audience leaned forward. I spoke with authority, vulnerability, and clarity. Every nod, every attentive gaze reinforced the lesson I had lived. Authenticity and excellence are inseparable. Returning to the office afterward, I realized the true victory wasn't the apology from HR or in winning the client pitch. It was in the culture I had influenced, the colleagues I had empowered, and the precedent I had set. I had turned a moment of microaggression into systemic change, proving that confidence, competence, and courage could redefine standards for everyone. That evening, I stood by the window of my apartment, city lights stretching endlessly below. My curls caught the glow of the fading sun, and I smiled, fully aware of how far I had come. I hadn't just defended my hair. I had claimed my identity, my dignity, and my right to be both authentic and professional. I had faced bias, strategized, persevered, and ultimately, I had won. And in that victory, I knew this. Professionalism is not dictated by appearances. It is measured by courage, integrity, and the unshakable confidence to be yourself, even when the world tries to define you otherwise. If you enjoyed this story and want more inspiring real-life workplace wins, hit that subscribe button. Don't miss future tips, personal stories, and strategies to stand tall in any professional challenge. Join our community and stay empowered, informed, and motivated every week.